We have a copy of the foundational contract that Planned Parenthood in Southern California has with the University of California in San Diego. Planned Parenthood and UC San Diego agreed that for valuable consideration, Planned Parenthood will supply the aborted baby body parts, and in return, Planned Parenthood will retain all right, title, and interest. And in exchange, Planned Parenthood will get a cut of the intellectual property and patent royalties that the university develops. It's disgusting.
Hello and welcome to the Anne and Phelim Scoop. It's just Phelim McAleer here today. Anne McElhinney is unwell, so please bear with me. What's on the show today? When Irish lies stop smiling, Irish voters overwhelmingly reject woke amendments to their constitution. We bring you the story and what it means. And when Gaza lies keep piling on, of course Hamas lied about the numbers of people killed in the current conflict. We bring you the receipts. And the lawsuits keep a-filing. Mark Steyn launches an appeal against the defamation judgment against him. And the Oscars keep a-failing. What a bore it was. I'm almost so bored that I don't even want to talk about it on the show, but I will. And the Planned Parenthood keeps a-selling. Only this time they want royalties included on the babies' bodies they have sold. We talked to the indefatigable and brilliant David Daleiden about his latest investigation and revelations. I don't know if you've followed the news about the Irish referendums. The Irish voters have overwhelmingly rejected what I think was a covert plan by the establishment parties to allow open borders, mass immigration, and the erasure of the word woman from Irish jurisprudence. Of course, they didn't sell it like that. There was two referendums. One was a so-called care referendum for the carers in the community, and they were going to delete other parts of the Constitution. And the second one was a so-called, there was a woman's places in the home provision in the Constitution, and they were going to get rid of that and make it more inclusive and talk about durable relationships rather than families. That's the way they sold it. They sold it as a way to change the Constitution as a way to have the Constitution reflect a diverse, progressive Ireland and atone for the apparent past sins against women. Of course, what they were going to do was in a world where women are being erased from their own sports, their own spaces, the idea of what is a woman. They were taking the word woman out of the Irish Constitution. And I don't think there's been a lot of talk about what happened, and I don't think that has got enough attention. To me, there was another aspect of it. Marriage was seen as the cornerstone of the family in Ireland in the Constitution. It was there in the Constitution. They decided to change that to durable relations. This had all sorts of ramifications, but for me the big ramification was, would someone, and immigration is a big problem in Ireland at the moment, which I'll come to later on in this piece. It was all very vague, and I just think people felt that the referendums were unnecessary and a Trojan horse for a progressive ideology that would be rejected if it was openly in a political manifesto. The defeat was a massive rejection of the established political parties. It would be wrong to describe the referendum as a David versus Goliath battle. That just doesn't do it justice. The yes side had 20 million euros in funding. Doesn't sound like a lot, really, does it? They had also all the political parties, except for one that had one representative in the parliament. So every political party, except one, which had one representative out of 160, they all supported it. Most of the media and most of the NGO sector, the non-governmental organisation sector. But Ireland now funds these NGOs, these non-government organisations, to the tune of €6 billion a year. This is in a country where the running costs of Ireland are 40 billion a year. So this is a major expenditure. And so not so shockingly, these government-funded so-called non-governmental organisations overwhelmingly supported what the progressive politicians wanted to pass. The no side on in contrast, had 144,000 euros in funding. Yes, 20 million versus 144,000. They had one upstart news outlet called grip.ie. John McGurk has been on the show often. They had a couple of dissident journalists and a retired attorney general in a suit asking questions. But the no side was always pushing an open door. People, not just in Ireland, no longer trust the mainstream media or the establishment politicians, and there was always a sense that these referenda or referendums were either a waste of time or not about what the establishment said they were about. The sense that something was being hidden became reality when the government decided for the first time not to publish the legal advice they had received regarding the possible consequences of changing the constitution. And instead, they assured the populace that the government lawyers had told them there would be no significant legal questions arising from changing two different clauses in the constitution. Of course, Irish people knew that was nonsense, because it's sometimes said that Ireland is closer in mentality to Boston and Berlin. That's an argument for a different day. But Ireland certainly shares the American fondness for litigation. You'd be amazed at what the Irish people will sue and get damages for. For example, 4 years ago, the Irish Supreme Court's 5 judges decided in a 51-page judgment that the bread in Subway sandwiches contained so much sugar that they were actually cakes and not sandwiches. Yes, they took 51 pages to tell that, and it went all the way to the Supreme Court. So to tell Irish people that there will be no litigation from 2 separate changes to the Constitution flew in the face of their lived experiences. And then Mr. Micheál Martin, the Deputy Prime Minister of Taoiseach, was forced to debate someone from the no side and showed that he wasn't used to answering tough questions from informed opponents. And that's what happens when you live in a progressive bubble with a progressive media. You don't get asked tough questions. You get spoon-fed easy questions. He was up against a barrister called Mark Steyn from the no side, and she made the obvious point that replacing the word marriage with durable relationships, with the phrase durable relationships in the Constitution, would allow immigrants to bring their multiple wives and extended families into the country. Mr. Martin said this couldn't happen because polygamy was illegal in Ireland, hoping that Irish people would forget that every week the country's Supreme Court is examining and re-examining laws to see if they are constitutional, and regularly strike out laws that contradict the Constitution, just like America. Everyone knows this, and for him to say this could not happen, that polygamy is illegal, if there's a law and it's against the Constitution trumps the law. We all know that. And immigration, of course, is a rather touchy subject in Ireland. There were riots not so long ago about this very subject. So pretending that there's nothing to be worried about sounded a little suspicious, I would contend. Then, just before the vote, someone leaked the legal advice that the government received. And lo and behold, it turned out that the constitutional changes could have serious impacts on immigration. And no one really believed it was coincidence that the changes could have the effect of removing the word woman from the Constitution. Irish people are connected enough to know that there's a worldwide NGO-driven movement to redefine what a woman is and to allow men to pretend to be and to have access to their sports and private places. Now, if you're unlucky enough to have seen the mainstream media reports of the defeats, the scale of the defeats, it was 74 and 67% against. The mainstream media are pushing voter confusion and unclear messaging. Of course, the opposite is true, because it's reported in the mainstream media. The exact opposite is true. Irish voters were not confused. They knew exactly what was being planned. They just didn't like it. And talking of confusion, you may be reading about the 31,000 people have allegedly been killed in Gaza, half of them children. I think the media initially reported these figures without any qualifications. Now they've been forced to say, as told to us by the ministry, the Gaza Ministry of Health, look, these figures have no basis in facts. But how can we be sure that they're fake? Well, Abraham Weiner, who is a statistician attached to University of Pennsylvania, UPenn, who give evidence for Mark Steyn in his defamation case, and is one of the top statisticians in the country. And just a genius, really. He has actually examined the figures, and it's a piece in the Tablet online site, the Tablet. He gives lots of different statistics and graphs, but have a look at this graph here. This, to me, says it all. It's funny. It's a bit like a graph showing climate change. The number of deaths have gone up by exactly the same amount every day of the conflict. So even during the ceasefires that they had for the release of the hostages, even while Israel was consolidating their positions and deciding to invade another part of Gaza, this exact same death toll. It defies logical sense. And as Mr. Weiner says in his piece, this regularity is almost surely not real. One would expect quite a bit of variation day to day. In fact, the daily reported casualty count over this period averages 270, plus or minus about 15%. This is strikingly little variation. There should be days with twice the average or more, and others with half or less. Perhaps what is happening is the Gaza ministry is releasing fake daily numbers that vary too little because they do not have a clear understanding of the behaviour of natural occurring numbers. So read the article, go to the Tablet, look for this article by Abram Weiner. It is, if you're not particularly mathematically inclined, it's very easily explained. If you are mathematically inclined, there's a deeper level to it that you'll really enjoy. It's well worth reading. And talking of well worth reading, Mark Steyn has appealed the defamation verdict and award in the DC courtroom against climate scientist and activist Michael Mann. Let's remember, Mann was awarded $1 compensatory damages and a massive $1 million impunitive damages, and that was because Mark Steyn criticised his hockey stick graph and criticised the supposedly independent investigation into Mann. Steyn, in his appeal, says he deserves a new trial because Mann's lawyer deliberately equated Steyn with January 6 rioters to inflame a juror he knew worked in the US Senate Sergeant at Arms office. And that staffer was caught up in the January 6 riots. And this is a quote from the lawsuit, which was written by Steyn's lawyer. The law states closing arguments, quote, must not be used to inflame the minds and passions of the jurors so that their verdict reflects an emotional response. Violating that duty, plaintiff's counsel in rebuttal equated defendants with Donald Trump and election deniers and the people who continued to deny that Trump lost the election despite overwhelming evidence to the contrary. Comparing defendants to Donald Trump and election deniers was an inflammatory and indeed incendiary appeal to politics and the January 6 violence. If you really want to understand the travesty of this verdict, I urge you to go to our podcast, Climate Change on Trial, where we were there every day for the Mark Steyn trial. We did a wonderful podcast on it with reenactments of the top days, top evidence from every day. It's one of our best podcasts, Climate Change on Trial. You won't want to miss it. Please go there and don't forget to leave a review. I mean, just to go on through the appeal, it's a wonderfully written appeal. Steyn's lawyers say likening defendants to Trump and election deniers in front of a jury comprised of District of Columbia residents was highly improper and surely prejudicial. I mean, that is the key. This DC jury was never going to give Mark Steyn a fair trial. And he's also, by the way, Mark Steyn has also said, I need a new trial or the case needs to be dismissed because Mann presented false figures to the jury. It was amazing. Mann presented a graph that said, I lost all tens of millions of dollars as a result of, in grant money, as a result of Mark Steyn's defamation of me. One grant, for example, he said, I lost $9 million. Turns out the grant was only worth just over $100,000. You know, who hasn't lost almost $9 million in a morning? Or misrepresented? Who hasn't? Which of you among us has not misrepresented $100,000 as $9 million? Once they presented that to the jury and then admitted it was wrong, the case should have been thrown out and Mann should have had to pay costs. But that's another story. Also, don't forget, Michael Mann, and this is another ground for appeal, has said much worse things about people who've attacked him. He has called people human filth. He has called them white supremacists. He's sexually smeared Judith Curry just for the crime of disagreeing with Michael Mann and his climate science. I just want to talk briefly about the Oscars. Funny, I often quite like award shows, but I felt cheated at the end of the Oscars. I mean, it's almost not worth talking. Just to know that between 2014 and 2020, the Academy Awards lost half their audience. They had a little blip because Will Smith smacked Chris Rock. But after last Sunday's awards, I won't watch them again. Maybe I will because I have to for my work. But don't forget, you can't. It's not every good movie that's allowed now into the Academy Awards. You have to meet DEI quotas. You have to have minorities. You have to have lesbians and gays in it. And so we're now not even at the stage where the best movies are even can be nominated. Or if you want your movie to be X, you realize, well, then it won't be part of the Oscar campaign. So I'd have to bring in these outside elements. It's the interference in art. And don't get me started about Jonathan Glazer. Right now we stand here as men who refute their Jewishness and the Holocaust being hijacked by an occupation which has led to conflict for so many innocent people. Don't start me. Hollywood is finished. The movie industry is on its last knees, and it deserves it by all accounts. If you look at that award show, if an alien came down and said, so this is the pinnacle of your entertainment industry, Jimmy Kimmel's lame jokes, Jimmy Kimmel being triggered by a Trump tweet in the last 5 minutes. I mean, it wasn't funny. Jimmy Kimmel was not funny. I will, unfortunately, continue to watch the award shows because you don't have to. So on a more serious note, we're going to go now over to our interview with David Daleiden of the Center for Medical Progress. He's one of the greatest journalists living in America today. He brings shame on any journalists living today, on most of them, with his research and his fearlessness. Let's go over to that interview that I did earlier, and let's go over there now. Hello, and I'm very happy to be joined by David Daleiden, the president and founder of the Center for Medical Progress. David has been on the show many times, is a friend of the show, friend of us, and he's got an amazing new news story that's just come out. That's why we've brought him here. Welcome to the show, David.
Great to be on again. Thank you.
So most people remember you for those stunning undercover videos revealing Planned Parenthood selling baby parts, and there's no allegation there. There's no allegedly they were selling baby parts. It was very profitable. I'll put the receipts up there. I'll just put an invoice up there for the skin of a baby and the skin of a Down syndrome baby. So you proved that, but now you've gone even deeper and found something possibly a little bit more disturbing than that, which is hard to fathom. So tell me about your latest discoveries, David.
Sure. So as your viewers can see the latest story on our website at www.centerformedicalprogress.org, we have been working on a pretty extensive public records investigation for the past several years now. We sent in a big California public records request to multiple taxpayer-funded research universities that Planned Parenthood has been contracted with for many years for different purposes, for expanding their abortion programs and supplying fetal tissue and other projects. And what we received in response recently is we have a copy of the foundational contract that Planned Parenthood in Southern California has with the University of California in San Diego, where for the past 15 years, Planned Parenthood in Southern California has been contracted with UC San Diego to supply aborted baby body parts to them for their research and experimentation, which is funded by the government, by the way. But in exchange for supplying the aborted baby body parts, what it says explicitly in this contract is that for valuable consideration, which is a federal crime to transfer aborted fetal tissue for valuable consideration. Planned Parenthood and UC San Diego agreed that for valuable consideration, Planned Parenthood will supply the aborted baby body parts, and in return, Planned Parenthood will retain all right, title, and interest in any patents or patent applications or other intellectual property that UC San Diego develops using the what they call the quote proprietary aborted baby parts from Planned Parenthood. So it's very clear, black and white, written into the contract. It's a criminal transaction in violation of the federal law against selling aborted fetal tissue for valuable consideration. They say for valuable consideration, we're giving you the baby body parts. They are our proprietary aborted fetal tissue, as if they own it and have a right to sell it or do whatever they want with it. And in exchange, Planned Parenthood will get a cut of the intellectual property and patent royalties that the university develops. It's disgusting.
There's so much to unwrap there. First of all, it's the initial sale of body parts for, to use the technical term, a valuable consideration. Have you any doubt about that, whether that's legal or not? I mean, maybe there's some loophole.
No, absolutely. If there was any doubt before, this contract between the University of California and Planned Parenthood completely dispels it. The very terms of the contract itself in describing this transaction, this is a criminal transaction. There's a big and obvious difference between agreeing with somebody, hey, if you do this for me, I'm going to reimburse your costs, versus, hey, if you do this for me, I'm going to give you a cut of my royalties afterwards.
Of course. And that was always Planned Parenthood's defense was, oh, we're just covering our costs. But as the congressional report into the sale of body parts found, they were already covering they were charging these research places and universities for their costs. They were charging them for the FedEx. They were charging them the handling fee. They were charging them. My favorite part of the invoice was, if it was 30 days, if the payment was 30 days late, they would charge them interest on it. So all the costs were covered. This was about profiting from the sale of baby parts.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, and the relationship between Planned Parenthood and the University of California is very extensive. There are many forms of financial benefit flowing from the University of California and other universities to Planned Parenthood that already make this a very profitable and a very valuable relationship for them. In addition to the latest information, I mean, so for example, we know that Planned Parenthood runs their abortion training programs out of the University of California. That supplies new abortion doctors for them to increase their abortion numbers, increase the abortion revenue at Planned Parenthood, while also supplying more aborted fetuses to the university for taxpayer-funded experimentation. There are major donors that have been originally major donors to UC San Diego that then, after this contract was signed and the relationship for fetal tissue began, these donors then extended their grant support to Planned Parenthood to the tunes of millions and millions of dollars. We're still learning more about that. And then on top of that, this contract where the university says, hey, Planned Parenthood, if you give us baby parts, you're going to own the intellectual property and patents that come out of them.
So can I just be clear here? So is there a payment and then they own what comes out of the investigations also, or are they saying we'll give them to you, but we want a cut of what comes out of the research?
So we're still learning more, but from what we know right now, there's both. There are both direct payments that go from the University of California to Planned Parenthood for under a variety of forms. And then the contract itself also promises that Planned Parenthood will have full ownership, not just a cut, but full ownership of any patents or patent applications or intellectual property that the University of California develops using aborted fetal tissue from Planned Parenthood.
I have to say that was what surprised me also, was full ownership. I mean, that wasn't a great deal by the University of San Diego, that they were going to do all the hard work, and it seems that Planned Parenthood were going to get all the rewards. And it shouldn't be dismissed as something that's not real, this desire to get the royalties for any inventions, because, by the way, if you can experiment on children's bodies, it's amazing the research you can come up with. Apparently, I mean, it's a little known secret It's a dirty little secret that so much medical research was hugely advanced because Nazi Germany was able and willing to experiment on living human beings during their regime. And, you know, if you are prepared to be amoral, immoral, ruthless, and do human experimentation, it's amazing the research, unethical and immoral human experiments. It's amazing the research you can gather up, and this is, you know, what struck me also about your research was the volume of it, and obviously this is very, very valuable to these research labs. They really want this because it allows them to do so much. Is that correct?
Well, there's a couple of things going on. Yes, you're absolutely right. If you have no rules to follow, right, because you have no ethical boundaries, then, you know, of course your job is going, you know, any job is going to be easier when you don't have to follow the rules, internal or external. But you know, it's unfortunate. There's no crucial medical breakthroughs or scientific advances that directly rely on aborted baby body parts. I mean, there are ethical ways to get the things that we want without having to rely on killing babies in order to do it. But unfortunately, given the extreme competition for government grants, for example, from the NIH, and also given just the extreme market competition among these various research universities and their laboratories and the different big pharma companies and stuff like that, when it comes to grant applications and when it comes to patent applications and things like that, many of these inventors and many of these people who are invested in this business, they want to be able to differentiate their product or their intellectual property or their government-funded grant application just enough from what the other guy is doing in order to make it different, to have a justification for getting the grant or filing their own invention patent while basically doing the same thing. And so what other experts have told me, what sources have told me previously, is that this is part of the sort of artificial demand for aborted baby body parts, that if a research team or a laboratory can change the way that they're doing an experiment or change the way they're working on a problem just a little bit compared to the other laboratory, because now we're doing it with fetal tissue as opposed to doing it with animal cells or doing it with adult human cells or something like that. That makes us different, and that gives us a justification for getting a new grant application or filing a new patent or something like that. And so there's sort of an artificial demand that gets baked into the marketplace as well, where it's basically greed. And so unfortunately, it's just a basic fact of reality that if you're not following the rules, whether legal rules or ethical rules or internal ethical rules, it's always going to be faster and easier to do your job in a certain sense, right? If you're not following the rules, if you're breaking the rules, and you can see that. I think you see that in the demand for aborted baby body parts for scientific experimentation. What sources have told me previously is that a lot of the demand for using aborted fetal tissue for experimentation, there's some amount of artificiality that's baked into it, where for example, if you have a research laboratory, you have multiple research laboratories, right, both in big pharma, in academia, and other places who are competing for government-funded grants, typically from the NIH. And also who may be competing with each other for registering different patents and patent applications and things like that. A large part of the demand for aborted fetal tissue for experimentation is because if one research laboratory is doing experiments on, say, some disease or some condition, and another research laboratory wants to compete for the same pot of grant money, if they can differentiate their grant application just a little bit by saying, well, we're going to do this experiment with aborted fetal tissue, not just with animal cells or not just with adult human cells, but we're going to do it with aborted fetal tissue as well, then that gives them the justification to say, oh, our experiment is different, our experiment is slightly different, we should also get NIH grant funding for it. We should also get a government funding grant for it. Or similarly in patent applications, where if someone wants to register an invention that is kind of similar to the other university's invention, but we're gonna tweak it just a little bit by saying we're doing it with aborted fetal cells instead of with these other cells, then they have a justification to say, our invention is different, and so we're patenting it, and we're going to sell the royalties based on that. So there's a little bit of artificial demand, which ultimately represents, some people might call it corporate greed, that is baked into the demand for aborted fetal tissue. When in reality, there's no, the Congressional Select Panel report exposed this very, very clearly. There's no crucial experimentation that's being done with aborted fetal tissue that you couldn't do with ethical sources of biological material.
That is, I was going to say, I said there, it's hilarious. It's funny. It's not funny, but what we're really saying is that it's like and funny. This came across when we covered the Mark Steyn trial recently. The grant process. It's very competitive, and as you say, a lot of it is box ticking. Actually, a lot of it is, is it this, is it this, is it this, and there's always one. Is this better than this? And of course, if you can go that one little bit better, then you get the extra point and you get the grant. It's a big price to pay to win the grant, and the patent, I suppose, this is patents. You can get a patent. It seems nowadays you can get a patent on a ham sandwich if you just put a different kind of mustard in it. There's so many. You see this on the program Shark Tank. Everyone's got a patent pending for the most ludicrous things, and it's again, this is part of the process of making sure you get the patent, and then that allows you to lock down certain technology. What's been the response to what you've uncovered?
Well, the video's been out for a little less than a week now. We released it. We released this information first on Tuesday last week, and your viewers can see it at centerformedicalprogress.org still. Pretty pleased with the viral response on X, formerly known as Twitter. But unfortunately, the establishment press has totally circled the bandwagons around Planned Parenthood and really on any abortion-related issues at this point, and does not want to touch any of these facts with a 10-foot pole. Even a lot of normally friendly right of center media is either very slow or even sometimes kind of scared to cover this information now, because Planned Parenthood and their very powerful allies like Kamala Harris in the White House, like biased federal judges in San Francisco, like Judge William Orrick, have really put the fear of God, or maybe the fear of somebody else, in a lot of otherwise reliable people. And it's much harder to get this information out now than it was several years ago, and that's unfortunate. But there is a lot of interest on the Hill. There's a couple of congressional offices who are very interested in this information. There is an ongoing federal Office of Inspector General investigation of fetal experimentation at the University of Pittsburgh right now, which we've talked about previously, where there's a lot of really Kermit Gosnell-esque activity going on at the University of Pittsburgh's fetal experimentation program. That's been under HHS OIG federal investigation, and they're basically like the FBI of healthcare related crime. They've been investigating the tissue bank at Pitt for the past 3 years now, 2.5 years, I guess. And so we're calling for that investigation to be expanded to include Planned Parenthood's activities in San Diego and any other locations where they are supplying aborted baby parts for experimentation with taxpayer dollars.
I mean, you're right. The media has there's something going on with the media, with the right of center media too, because they almost didn't really cover the Mark Steyn trial. Look, I've said this often on the show. The right of center media, they seem to think journalism is commenting on what the New York Times has reported on. They don't. The original journalism, if it's not out there, they won't report on it. They won't comment on it. And I think people need to know that journalism is about doing your original stories, not just commenting on what establishment media says, and that gives the establishment media a lot of power. And the next time you see somebody whining and whinging about the decline of local media or local newspapers or newspapers in general, ask, why isn't the local San Diego newspaper covering this? This is University of California, San Diego, buying baby parts from Planned Parenthood, and in a contract with Planned Parenthood, that Planned Parenthood own the rights and royalties to any inventions that come out of that. it's law-breaking, it's unethical. By the way, do we know what the original consent form from the women who had the abortions were? I mean, did they know that this was going to be sold for a valuable consideration? Did they know that the person who was selling it was going to get all of the benefits of the invention, get the royalties? Or not even a royalty, as you say, it's an actual, to own the invention. And how can a medical provider like Planned Parenthood be genuinely interested in the welfare of a patient, of the right thing to do for that patient, if so much money and so much valuable consideration is dependent upon the abortion going ahead? What if someone's having doubts and they need to meet their quota for the University of California, San Diego? Surely that is a conflict of interest.
It's a huge conflict of interest, and that is probably one of the most foundationally dark and disturbing aspects of fetal experimentation in general. People want to talk about it like, oh, well, if the babies are going to die anyway, if the abortions are going to happen anyway, then why can't we use the aborted baby parts afterwards? The problem is that when it comes to a life or death decision like abortion, people are still making up their minds up to the moment that they're on the operating table sometimes. And so to bring somebody else's, who's completely unrelated to this family, this couple, this woman, whatever is going on, to bring somebody else's financial and commercial and scientific curiosity and other interests into the very personal and fraught and life or death irrevocable decision of somebody to go through with an abortion of a child, it's a complete conflict of interest. And even if it happens just one time that somebody gets pressured into having an abortion that they otherwise were not going to do, that's an irreparable injury, and that's something that nobody, not even the University of California with all of its taxpayer funding, can take back. And so it's very serious. And by the way, in terms of the consent forms, no, the patients certainly are not being informed that the University of California is going to develop valuable commercial property off of their aborted baby parts and then give either the royalties or ownership of that to Planned Parenthood. They're not being informed about that. And there's actually some indications, and CMP will be releasing more information about this in the coming weeks and months, but we actually have some indication that there might not be any consent at all that is being sought or obtained for harvesting the fetal body parts, period, because there are a couple of loopholes or certain categories that some of these universities like to exploit in order to avoid any paper trail whatsoever.
Yeah, I wouldn't be surprised. And I seem to remember during your original investigation, there would be a fax or an email would come in saying, I need this and I need that from my research and I need this from my research. And of course, if that, let's say, it's the left arm of an African-American baby or an Asian baby, this is the level of what they were asking for, or the skin of a child. I mean, you can buy the skin of a baby in America for $320 plus package and posting. We'll put that, and we're going to put that invoice up on the screen right now. So I think people were saying, I need this, I need that. And of course, imagine if you're a doctor and you know that one of your best customers needs this abortion to go ahead, and the woman says, I'm having second thoughts. The conflict is irredeemable. The conflict is massive and should not exist. And it's another reason why this should be and is illegal. I want to move on to a wider topic now. The pro-life movement, since Roe versus Wade has lost, I think, almost every state ballot initiative about abortion, even in places like Montana, which would be more conservative. And in many states, abortion is now available up until 9 months as a result of these initiatives. Why do you think the pro-life movement is losing these ballot initiatives, and what do you think can be done?
Well, I'm not an expert, but from my vantage point, I really think that our message is not getting out right now. I think that a lot of speakers may be leading with their chin when it comes to abortion-related issues, rather than leading with the facts that are the most compelling for the public, and that make our policy positions the clearest. We're not talking nearly enough about the way that so many of these ballot initiatives are designed by a predatory abortion industry to enshrine late-term abortion, third trimester abortion after the point where the baby is viable outside the womb, to make that untouchable in the state law, and to expand late-term abortion of healthy, viable babies who are indistinguishable from any of us or anyone that we love. And it's not all the fault of the speakers or the folks who are leading the efforts against these initiatives in different states. So, a large part of it is due to the establishment press circling the bandwagons around the abortion industry and refusing to cover the facts about the horrors of institutionalized abortion in our country. But unfortunately, the result is the same, right? If either we're not speaking clearly enough, or the establishment press is being biased and refusing to cover what we're actually saying and the facts that we're actually pointing to, it's kind of a double problem in a way, because we're not speaking the message loudly or clearly enough, and the platforms that where that should be spoken are trying to shut the message out. So I think it's kind of a twin problem of those two things. We may not be able to control the second part of it, but we can certainly control the first part of it. So I think it's really important that we continue to report the facts about the horrors of the industrial scale abortion industry in this country. I think we need to be probably clearer about it, more focused about it.
Well, give me some of the facts that you think we should be leading with. Just like
I think we should be talking about the fact that after California, where we're both located, after California passed Proposition 1 to so-called enshrine an unlimited right to abortion in the state constitution, there are now 2 Planned Parenthood abortion doctors who are suing the city of Beverly Hills in Los Angeles State Court for the right to open up a third trimester abortion clinic, a third trimester for any reasons abortion clinic in Beverly Hills. There are more clinics like this that are opening up in different places. One of the oldest third trimester abortion clinics in Washington, D.C., which is a registered clinic of the National Abortion Federation, there were the bodies of 5 late-term viable babies who were recovered by whistleblowers from that clinic 2 years ago. The DC5, your viewers may be familiar with them or can look them up. And the wounds on their bodies, or in one case, the body with no wounds whatsoever, completely intact in the amniotic sac, are 100% consistent prima facie evidence of illegal partial birth abortions. This is not being talked about. There should be congressional hearings about what was done to those 5 babies. By the way, they were recovered from boxes where they were being shipped to a waste-to-energy facility in Baltimore to burn for electricity. So late-term, viable age, healthy babies are being killed, likely by partial birth abortions at these third trimester abortion clinics in our country, either shipped off to burn for electricity or selling the body parts for patent rights at taxpayer-funded universities. This is the stuff that people should be talking about. I don't know why we're talking about IVF clinics in Alabama. I don't know why pro-life leaders and pro-life public officials are talking about IVF clinics in Alabama when we could be talking about the commodification of children who are just like us.
Very good point, David. Thank you for coming on. And I mean, it's shocking. It's amazing that this is going on in 2024 America. The late-term abortions up to 9 months, as you say, the commodification of baby parts of children's bodies, and the partial birth abortion of babies 8 and 9 months old. It's a dark underbelly of America now that needs to be exposed, and when every day that journalism doesn't is another reason why we should rejoice when journalism collapses, when newspapers collapse, when news outlets collapse, because there's great stories out there, and I say that as a journalist, not as a human being. Very often, what journalists think of great stories is very sad and not great for the humans involved in them, but that's journalism for you. And look, the journalists out there, these are great stories. If you're not covering them, you're not a journalist. And, don't be surprised when the public don't want to read what you're producing because they know it's not real. They may, deep down they know it's not real. Deep down they know that this is not telling them the truth about their society. And that's why you're in a a long, steady decline that will become a short, sharp decline. So, David, thank you for coming on. Where can people find you and find the video and find everything about you?
Your viewers can find everything at www.centerformedicalprogress.org. You can see the latest information about the latest video release there, reporting on this story about this contract for selling baby parts, selling proprietary baby parts from Planned Parenthood to the University of California for intellectual property rights. You can find all of this on our website at www.centerformedicalprogress.org.
Okay, David, thank you very much.
Thank you.
There are questions to be asked about why the right of centre media are not covering stories like they should be. There are questions to be asked why the mainstream media are not covering stories like they should be. There are questions to be asked why the billionaires who allegedly fund so much of the centre-right activity in America are not buying news outlets, are not producing their own news outlets. To cover these stories, and then when if these outlets do pop up, why they're not doing original journalism. We'll come back to that story, I think, in the future a lot. So for now, that's the end of the show. Don't forget to leave your comments in YouTube. Don't forget to leave your comments in the Apple Podcast app. We love to hear what you think, and we do read them all. Thank you. Bye.